This is Scott Richmond
and Arnie Sherman.
You're listening to What Do You Know on Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290 and 101.5 FM. All right, welcome to What Do You Know? Arnie, how was your weekend?
You know, my weekend's been great so far. You know, and I'm excited about being in here. We have a great show for our listeners.
I know.
You know, joining us in a few minutes will be our guest, Eileen Waterstone, who has been a personal assistant to the multi-talented genius Steve Martin for 27 years.
One of my favorites.
And before that, she worked for Carrie Fisher, which is kind of timely at this point, given the record-shattering performance of The Force Awakens and Star Wars,
right?
And bringing the crew back, bringing the band back together again on Star Wars. So that's very exciting. She'll be joining us just in a few minutes.
Great.
But we're a few days into 2016, and I haven't even asked you if you made a New Year's resolution yet.
And I told you what my resolution was. It was no resolution. I made a resolution.
What a wuss. Come on.
I'm going paleo.
Well, that's
I told you I was going paleo.
That's a resolution.
But I broke it last night.
Well, let me tell you about that. You know that 25% of people who make resolutions break them in the first week. And 60% of the people that make them, they don't last more than a month. So you're not alone in your frailty and your ability to persevere. You know, and of course the top resolutions this year are similar to the ones from every previous year. Losing weight is number one. It continues to be number one. Getting yourself better organized, spending less money and saving more, and staying healthy and fit. You know, and in my case, for the last 25 years, I've tried to do the weight loss resolution, and you can see how
good.
It's not working so great. But I still try every year to try to figure out how to make that work. And this year, for the holidays, I got a Fitbit. And for some of the
where? Let me see.
I have it right on my wrist here.
Oh, you do. He does, ladies and gentlemen. It's black.
It's for real. I have a black Fitbit Pulse.
He's not pulling
on my wrist. And I have to tell you, this is the devil's device.
How come?
This thing tracks your steps. It tracks your heartbeat. It tracks your calories burned. How many stair steps you've climbed. How many calories you've burned. I think it was designed in Nazi Germany and refined in the United States just recently. This Fitbit company, which is part of this, huge industry of diet and healthcare and fitness. They went public recently at a $6 billion valuation.
Yeah.
Just for these kinds of devices. But I'm telling you, it's an evil device. It was set up. The device comes. You wear it on your wrist. It's set for 12,000 steps a day. That's
what is
6 miles?
I was going to say, what is that? Okay.
And I've been told by regular users, one of my neighbors, that to really get a benefit out of this, if you want to lose weight, or if you really want to be fit, you got to get up to about 20,000 steps a day to see the impact, to see the real impact. And I was thinking about that. Did you know that the Bataan Death March, which was considered a war crime, was only about 6 miles a day? And then really to get any benefit out of the Fitbit. So I'm wearing this thing. I got up at 8 o'clock this morning. Give you an example. I get up in the morning.
What do you do? Yeah,
I do some chores in the morning. I go on the treadmill for 30 minutes.
Nice.
It's kind of cold around, so go to the treadmill.
Yep.
I walk around. I try not to sit, when I'm at my desk. And by about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I look at the thing, and I'm only up to about 7,000 steps.
You're kidding me.
No. It's a killer. It's totally killer. And... So I can see right now, truthfully, Scott, that this is not going to work out for me as a personal assistance device of choice. It's just not going to give me what I need. There are a number of these devices out there, and there's a number of other devices that provide assistance, and artificial intelligence assistance like Siri. A lot of people who are relying on Siri. They're relying on Cortana is another version of Siri. Alexa, they seem to all have women's names. There isn't a Bob or a Tyrone, and now the latest one that's being beta tested is Amy, which does your calendar for you and all that. So these devices are all there to kind of help organize your day. Did you ever have a personal assistant? Did you ever want a personal assistant?
Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah. Did you have one?
I did a couple of jobs ago.
Yeah, and how'd that
to show you
work
my ascension in the professional world.
You've gone down.
I've gone down. I am my personal assistant. It was great. In New York especially, it was great. Dinner reservations, theater reservations, tickets, all that stuff.
You remember when Kramer on Steinfeld had a personal assistant from NYU and we created a fake Kramerica Industries? He had that personal assistant following him around.
Uh-huh.
Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg made a New Year's resolution this year, by the way, and he wants to create an artificial intelligence PA to run his whole house.
Wow.
And that's his New Year's resolution and his resolution. So for healthy people like you and for the unemployed,
right?
A device like Fitbit is great. You have enough time to get up to 20,000 steps. For the rest of us who are sedentary part of the day or don't have, or not used to living a healthy lifestyle.
Right.
I'm more inclined, towards the human personal assistant, and today we have the, one of the best ones around is going to be our guest today. As I mentioned, Eileen Waterstone, who's a real-life executive assistant or personal assistant out in L.A. She works at L.A. Films.
Perfect.
She's been with Steve Martin for all these years, and we're going to bring her on, and we're going to talk a little bit, about what her life, what her work life is like, and
L.A. Films is his company.
It's his company.
Okay.
And talk more about that role. I think it's a fascinating role. I think a lot of people aspire to, being involved. You have a dream of being involved in the entertainment world,
right? Or
with entertainers, and
right.
And what better person to talk to than someone that's been assisting Steve Martin for all these years.
I can't wait to speak to her. Yes. I have so many questions. He's one of my favorites.
Yeah, it's one of mine. And who doesn't like Steve Martin, right?
Well, you love his banjo playing.
Right. You love his movies.
His films, his writing.
Stand-up, his writing.
His stand-up.
His New Yorker articles. I mean, he's just a Renaissance man.
He is, but to be a personal assistant to a Renaissance man,
it's pretty cool.
She must be super special.
Yeah, well, we're going to find out.
All right, I'm looking forward to it. You're listening to What Do You Know on KGVO 101.5 FM 1290 AM or AM 1290 and newstalkkgvo.com. We'll be back right after these words. Eileen Waterstone, welcome to What Do You Know?
Well, thank you, Arnie.
You're here with Scott Richmond and myself in Missoula, Montana. How are things in L.A.?
Well, they were raining, but now the sun has come out, of course.
Well, that's good. That's perfect timing for our interview.
Exactly.
So we shared with the listeners a little bit about the fact that you've, for the past, so many years, 27 years or so, worked for Steve Martin, and before that had the privilege of working with Carrie Fisher. And probably the first question that we want to ask you is, how did you first become a personal assistant, executive assistant? How did you find your way into this job that people dream of?
Well, it was very peculiar. I've lived in L.A. my entire life, since, really since 1955. And I never actually tried to work in show business. I had, forays, production work, theater work a little bit, but I worked in the fashion business. I worked in advertising. And in 1985, I met Carrie through some mutual friends. And about 3 months after I met her, she asked me if I would come work for her. And she was in the process of, at that point, of writing her first book, Postcards from the Edge.
Right.
And I got to work with her on that. And then about 2.5 years later, Carrie and I had some differences of opinion, I would say. And we were going to part ways, and she was going to give me 3 months to find another job, and as luck would have it, that night, she and the writer Buck Henry, who's since become a friend, went out to dinner with Steve and his then-wife, the actress Victoria Tennant, and they had been looking for somebody, and Carrie told them that I would be available, and they called me from the restaurant, and I was without a job for less than 24 hours. So I've actually worked with Steve since September of 1987, so I've been in this job now for over 28 years.
Well, you probably know how to do it better than anybody else, but at the very beginning, how did you learn to do this job? I mean, as we see it, as the outsiders look at this, you have to call up, you got to get people's phone numbers, you got to get the secret codes of the rich and famous. And how did you figure that all out?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I went to work for Steve in 1987. He was living down in Beverly Hills, and I had an office in his house. And interestingly enough, I like to call him Mr. Early Adopter because he had an email address.
Wow.
He had an email address on CompuServe. It was a long series of numbers at CompuServe.com. So he got me an email address so that we could communicate with each other in the same house. And the only other person I knew who had email was my brother because he was a university professor, and otherwise I didn't know anybody who had email. So I learned how to do that. And mostly I think the reason why I'm able to do this job successfully is because I have lived in L.A. all my life, and I'm just one of those people who, if I don't know how to do something, I know how to ask the right questions, and I pretty much can find anything, and so I'm well-suited to it, but it was really sort of, figuring it out as time went on because Steve had let his previous assistant go a couple of months before I came to work, and so I didn't really have anybody to ask but Steve, and he was helpful, and it was the same thing with Carrie. I mean, I had never done anything like that before, and you kind of, day to day, they tell you what they need, and you figure out how to make sure they get it.
That's cool. It's not divulging any confidentialities. What was the interview like? I mean, being interviewed for a job like that, either by Carrie or by Steve Martin. What was the problem?
Carrie and I didn't really have an interview that I recall. I think that we became friendly, and I think she liked me, and so I believe one day she just asked me if I would like to come to work for her. But the interview with Steve was hilarious because his former wife, Victoria, conducted it, and Steve came in and asked me 3 questions.
Yeah.
Do you smoke?
Right.
No.
No.
Do you like cats? Yes. Can you spell? Yes. And then he left the room.
That's fantastic.
And that was my interview with Steve. The rest of it was conducted by his wife. And I believe it was a day and a half later.
Right.
They left and went to Europe, and there I was in their house.
Wow. Let me ask you about that. I mean, is there a demarcation between doing work stuff and personal stuff? I mean, you've mentioned you're working out of the house. Is there rules and limits, and how did you figure that?
Absolutely. The thing that I had to learn very, very quickly is that my employer has, with Carrie, it was more mixed. I mean, Carrie is, she's a very casual person, I would say, and so, I was pretty much just sort of everywhere all the time, and she used to take me, to dinner. I remember going to dinner at the record producer Richard Perry's house with Carrie, and Tina Turner was there, and Carrie used to take me along, and I used to travel with Carrie. And with Steve, it's very different. He's a very private person.
Right. And
so I really sort of stay in my own area unless I'm invited to come elsewhere. Where I am now, I have an office above the garage, which is attached to the house, but it's up, a staircase as you just come in the back door.
Right.
And I don't go past the kitchen family room into the rest of the house unless I'm invited to do so.
That's interesting. I was just listening to Jerry Seinfeld doing Comedians in Cars with, having coffee. And he did the Obama interview.
Right.
And he asked Obama, does he walk around the White House in his underwear? Uh-huh. Or how far can he go in his underwear? And Obama basically said, I don't walk around in my underwear.
Well,
you don't have to. I'm not prying into what kind of underwear and.
Just FYI, Steve is going to be on the Wednesday episode of Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee.
Great,
he'll be on Wednesday.
That'll be fun.
So, yeah, in some car that I've never heard of, some obscure red Italian sports car of some vintage that I've never seen before in my life.
Well, President Obama Seinfeld had President Obama in a 63 blue Chevy Corvette.
Oh, I know. It was amazing. I saw it.
Oh, yeah, it was a great segment.
Hey, Eileen, this is Scott. Arnie.
Hi, Scott.
How are you?
Good, and you? I'm Arnie's favorite cousin, by the way.
I know.
Just in case he hasn't told you.
He did. And
I'm Harry's daughter. You remember Harry?
We love Harry.
Harry we love.
What's
Everybody
not to love?
Right, exactly.
You know, I have a question relative to, my understanding is that Steve Martin is incredibly prepared for everything he does. And I mean everything, whether it be a hit on a late-night talk show or a movie he's writing or hosting the Oscars. He is just supposed to be known as the most prepared person in the room.
Well, my experience of him is that he's an incredibly hard worker and that he doesn't really take anything for granted. When he hosted the Oscars the 3 times, and I've been working for him all the times that he hosted the Oscars, you know, he was part of the writing team. And it was really his decision who to hire for most of the other writers. I mean, the team that writes the Oscars is generally around 10 people. And he works very, very hard, and he takes it very seriously. And I know that the awards presentations that I've gone to, when he got the Mark Twain Prize, when he got just this past year, he got the Life Achievement Award from the American Film Institute. I mean, his speeches are very well thought out, and I just think that he's a very serious and a very intellectual person.
Who happens
extremely smart.
Who happens to be extremely funny at the same time.
Oh, he's incredibly funny, but not so much in real life. I mean, there have been some very funny moments, but basically, you know, he's really kind of a quiet, very intellectual guy, unless, you know, he gets with his other friends. I mean, you know, I remember not long after I went to work for him, he was filming Father of the Bride, and the first one, and we were walking down the street, and it was me and Steve and Marty Short, who has become his best friend and really, you know, became his closest friend pretty much right after they did the Three Amigos. And we were walking down the street, and Marty, apropos of nothing, says to Steve, "Steve, what would you do if Eileen took the cats and put them in the blender and turned it on?" And Steve said, "Well, I would, of course, make her put them back together the way they were."
Well, you mentioned Father of the Bride. Now, yes. I know, because I've seen it, that you had a chance to be an actress in Father of the Bride,
that
too.
That was in part 2.
Yes, and you played a nurse.
I did. I played the admitting nurse. And I remember I got extra pay. I think I made $114 for about 15 hours of work, if I remember this correctly. They did have to pay me,
right.
Although I was still getting paid by Steve, so it was, you know, really sort of a vanity project for me.
Right.
And at one point, Steve walked up to me and he says, "Well, now you know what I do all day long." And I thought, yeah, and if I was making, you know, $500,000 a week, it would probably be a lot better, you know.
Instead of $114.
Instead of $114 for the whole day, you know.
Well, you know, that begs the question. There is a network, I would imagine, of personal assistants that are throughout Hollywood or show business that you probably are friendly with. And do you... Tell us about that, if it in fact exists.
It does exist. There was, years ago, somebody invited me to come to a meeting to something called the Association of Personal Assistants or something, and I went to some kind of a mixer or something. But the truth of the matter is, I didn't really feel the need to belong to it, to tell you the truth. I have my own friends. And I certainly have, met some wonderful people. I mean, there's a woman named Christina McGinnis who has worked for Lorne Michaels from the beginning of Saturday Night Live. And, she's sort of the doyen of all of these many assistants that Lorne has had, a whole gaggle of sort of young girls who have passed through the show. But Christina's sort of the, the grande dame. And, there's a few others. Ron Howard has a longtime assistant. Tom Hanks has a longtime assistant. David Geffen has a longtime assistant.
Right.
And I, interact with them, a lot. And, every once in a while, I'll call them and say, do you have a good electrician? Or they'll call me and say, do you have a good plumber? Or where can I get something altered? Or, but basically, I sort of find out all of this stuff kind of on my own. And, things have changed a lot since I came to work for Steve. I mean, houses have been added, pets have come and gone.
Wow.
Steve has, a new wife. He has, a daughter.
And time marches on. He's, 70 now?
He's 70. He turned 70 last August.
Amazing.
And the crazy part is I'm going to be 65 in March, and so by the time I retire from here, I'll probably have been here 34 years when it comes right down to it,
Well, you mentioned, Steve said to you in Father of the Bride, too, now you know what I do every day.
Yes.
Is there a typical day for you, and if so, what's it like?
There is no typical day, really. There are typical aspects. I come in the morning. I start work at 10 o'clock. I'm so spoiled. I haven't had a job that started before 10 a.m. since 1985. And, I love that.
That's great.
I am not a morning person. And anyway, I come in and, email has completely changed the nature of work. I do have to say that. The majority of correspondence that one does now is by email or text. I mean, you rarely ever even have to talk to anybody on the phone anymore. And so, I come in the morning and, Steve will send me emails, he needs this, what about this? Or I get emails and I have to relay them. And basically, I view myself as sort of the empress of the empire, when it comes right down to it, because I kind of interact with everybody in his life. And so there's really no typical day. I mean, some days I do something as mundane as go to the pet store and buy dog food. Right. Something that I know that you do, Arnie.
Yes.
I mean, we're like regular people here. There's a dog, and he eats, and, and so there's lots of just sort of regular aspects. And the truth is, I guess because of my egalitarian nature and having grown up in the 60s, I think that going to get dog food is just as valuable as going to the Academy Awards, and you can dress more casually when you go to get the dog food.
Yes. Have you ever had to staff up? Like when, let's say, there was a project that involved a lot of moving parts. Does the personal assistant have a personal assistant?
I do not. The only time I've ever had to staff up, unfortunately, I have terrible body structure, and I've had a number of orthopedic surgeries. So during my recuperation times, I work from home and I hire somebody to be my legs.
Got it.
I'm a terrible boss. I'm a terrible boss.
Why?
because I just think I can do it better than anybody else.
Well, you can. I mean, that's true. So that's not being terrible.
And basically, we can sort of outsource anything that we need.
Sure.
If I need, 25 packages wrapped, for Christmas, I know where to go to get that done. And in terms of like parties and such, we have a chef. And so he does the staffing for the parties and takes care of all of that and all the shopping and everything else, So, but I've had to, hire security. I've had to hire, valet parkers. I've overseen numerous remodeling projects. We have a terrific contractor whom we've used almost from the beginning, and they've done all of our projects. And but I'm here to oversee them. I'm here to make sure that everything gets done on time. I'm here to make the calls, to make sure that somebody is here at the time. I do all of that.
You're like the general contractor.
Well, yes and no. I'm kind of the overseer. It's kind of what it is. And he has other houses and he has other people who work in those houses, but I'm the one who interacts.
Right.
Well, let me ask a question. So when
Sure.
the line of demarcation, like you said, was the kitchen/living room
Yeah.
At the job, but when you leave the job, this world that you're living in is not necessarily the world that you live in.
No.
Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind, if it's not...
Well, it's interesting. I mean, this is on a scale, and this would be with any, sort of prominent celebrity, I guess. It's on a scale that most people will never experience. I mean,
Right.
Beautiful homes, beautiful things, nice cars, all of that kind of stuff. And I've had tiny moments of envy, and I don't think that I'd be human if I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
But most of the time, I'm perfectly happy, with what I have. I mean, I'm happy to go home. Like I said, he's Mr. Early Adopter. He likes gadgets. He has, fancy, light switches and TVs that are too complicated for me. And, and the truth is I'd rather go home and just have a light switch that goes on and off. Really. And, but yeah, sometimes, it's hard not to be envious of, the access or the ability to pretty much, do or get whatever you want. I mean, but I don't let that control me in any way. I mean, and I certainly don't begrudge him anything that he has.
No, he's right. Incredible talent and incredible mind.
So so on the job, what's the most fun thing that you ever did? Is there one thing that stands out?
The really fun thing for me has been the last number of years. Steve has retaken up the banjo, and by the way, this is not a new development for Steve. He's been playing since he was 17.
Right.
And he started playing. He went to high school with John McEwen of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band.
Right.
And John started him playing, and then John's brother Bill McEwen was Steve's road manager for years when he was starting out on the road as a comic. And I think it's been about the last 6, 7, 8 years that he's really started taking up the banjo, very seriously. And in March, it's going to culminate in his musical that he wrote with Edie Brickell called Bright Star, which is currently at the Kennedy Center. It's going to open on Broadway.
Wow.
I mean, which is, really sort of incredible. But I'm someone who absolutely loves music. And, he's also an art collector. And I didn't know anything about art when I came here, but I've actually gotten quite an education in terms of art and museums and galleries and being able to identify artists, just by looking at a picture. I've learned a lot. But music has always been, my great love. And so Steve has started, playing and touring, and this continues to this day. And so, I've gone to, 20 shows at least, and in really, really fun places like the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival. And, but, I get to go, as his assistant, which means that they put a chair on the stage in the shade and they go, "Is this okay for you, Ms. Waterstone?" And, I kind of like that. That's kind of fun. And, so it's the music thing that's just really knocked my socks off.
That's good. That's really good.
I just love it. I mean, I was in Washington, D.C. at the end of October, and Steve and the band, the Steve Canyon Rangers, the guys that he plays with out of Asheville, North Carolina, they played with the National Symphony in Washington, D.C., and it was fantastic.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go to the opening of the play in March. And this has been, for me, the absolute highlight. And going to the Academy Awards has been fun, let's face it.
Yeah, right.
I think it's safe to say you are the personal assistant to somebody who is on such a high level. It's not like just being a personal assistant to a celebrity.
No.
I mean, this is a creator. He creates.
I mean, it's not like he was rocketed to fame and then he's been a B-list guy. I mean, he's always been an A-list from the beginning to the end.
But he's beyond celebrity, though. It's what's interesting about him is that he's so beyond the celebrity aspect of it. He is just leaving the world a better place than how he found it through all this great work he's created, and Eileen's helping him do that.
Well, here's the crazy thing for me. I obviously was aware of who he was when I went to work for him. I mean, there's no getting around that.
Right.
the first time I met him, actually, Carrie Fisher had a birthday party, and it was like a square dance party. It was the weirdest thing at this place called Calamigos Starcy Ranch, which I had gone to when I was a kid. And she had this party, and Steve and his then-wife Victoria came, and I remember, and there were some, like, really big celebrities at this party, and I remember, I was still working for Carrie, and I remember thinking, I really like the people who are willing to get up and be goofy and square dance, and the other people just aren't even worthy of consideration. And Steve and Victoria got up to square dance, and they were in the same square with me and my friend Bobby. And so I remember looking at him and thinking, wow, he's really good looking. Because, he was the guy who was the jerk, and I didn't think of him that way.
The wild and crazy guy with the arrow over his head.
Exactly. Anyway, most of the time, I don't think of him as Steve Martin. I think of him as, like, the guy I work for, because I've been here so long. It's not like every day I walk in and I think, wow, I work for Steve Martin. But when he started doing live shows, because I had never seen him when he used to tour doing comedy. I had never seen him. By the time he ended up his career in stand-up, he was playing these huge arenas.
Yes.
With complete and total adulation from the fans. And I've gone to these music shows, and when he comes out, people go berserk. And then I realize, he's that guy.
That's right.
He's that guy. Yeah. And most of the people, I'm convinced of this now, when he first started touring, most of the people weren't really interested in the music. I think what they were interested in was seeing Steve Martin in person, because it was billed as an evening of comedy and bluegrass.
Right, so they thought he was going to have the banjo around his neck, and he was going to do shtick, right? He was
Exactly.
Yes.
But what I saw during the course of the evening is that people really started getting into the music. It was really interesting. And I've seen this all along, and now, he has 2 of his own CDs and 2 CDs with Edie Brickell. And I think people have become more and more familiar with what it is that he's trying to do.
And nominated and winning Grammy, or just not? Yeah.
Yes, he did win. He won a Grammy for his first CD, The Crow, and then he won a Grammy for Best Americana Song for one of the songs from the first CD with Edie.
Wow, that's amazing.
So and he's won everything but an Oscar. Well, except for he got the honorary Oscar.
The honorary one.
A couple of years ago.
He got an honorary one, and he wasn't dying, which is pretty amazing. Usually it's the, Kirk Douglas or somebody like that.
Exactly. He was 900 years old.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, no, he's very much alive, I have to say.
So let me ask you this. So,
sure.
What about, what's the most annoying or difficult situation you've had to deal with? Is there some stalker? Is there some, person that every time they try to reach Steve, it's a nightmare?
There was a stalker.
Really?
She still comes around once in a while. She's completely harmless. I mean, there have been a number, but usually, we don't take these things so seriously if they're writing from, across the country or whatever.
Right.
The most annoying thing I've had to deal with, quite frankly, is that some people in show business are just not very nice.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not going to name any names.
Don't name any names.
No, we're not going to ask you that.
And even some of the assistants to some of the not nice people are not very nice. And I don't like that kind of behavior. And I think it's completely unnecessary, and I'm not really sure why people do it or put up with it. I'm very lucky because I work for one of the nicest, most decent people in the world, not just in show business, but I would say in the world. And because he's such a big star, the creeps, they kiss my butt, basically.
Hey, that's good.
And I try to be nice to everybody.
Yeah, so who are some of the other really nice people? I mean, you don't want to talk about the bad people, but who are some of the other really nice people that you get to deal with? Marty
Short, Diane Keaton, Tom Hanks is a doll. Carl Reiner is the nicest man in Hollywood.
Oh.
And he and Steve have a very close relationship going all the way back to The Jerk,
Right.
And, Carl is quite old now. He and my dad went to the same high school. My dad went a year before Carl did, and Estelle, Carl's late wife, went to the same high school as my mother and your mother,
Arnie.
Right. And, Carl has started to lose it a little bit.
Yes.
But, he surprised Steve. They didn't know if he would be able to come to the American Film Institute thing, and he was in the audience, and he stood up, and I don't think Steve knew he was there, and Steve started to cry. I mean, it was so sweet. And, they're great. Ron Howard is fantastic. Frank Oz. Who else have I dealt with? I mean, there's been some really, really terrific people.
You're talking about Carl Reiner, but I just saw a piece on TV with Mel Brooks, and he seemed to be still on the top of his game.
Oh, he's great.
He was even talking about doing another movie version of Spaceballs now that the Force Awakens has done so well.
Exactly.
Is that right?
Well, he and Carl spend an enormous amount of time together. They've both lost their wives, and Mel goes over there all the time.
I'll forget one of the first, and I think you've seen it too. Comedians in Cars with Coffee, when he went over to Carl Reiner's house, Mel Brooks and Steve. Mel Brooks.
When they had a deli?
And he said, you didn't bring pot pie?
Right.
I mean, it was...
How about the David Steinberg? Has Steve been on that David Steinberg show?
Yes, he has, and that was really fun. Actually, Steve owns the house next door to his.
Okay.
And they taped it there. And David Steinberg is an absolutely sensational interviewer because he knows how to shut up and let people talk.
Right.
And that was a very, very good episode. It was terrific. I don't know if you can find it anywhere, but it was excellent.
It's on Showtime.
Really?
Has
he done Charlie Rose? I always liked
a number of times.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, one of the times that he was on, there's that great Beth Henley play, A Couple of White Chicks Sitting Around Talking, and I labeled that episode A Couple of White Guys Sitting Around Talking.
Yes.
No, he's been on pretty much every talk show ever in the history of ever, I think.
Has he been, I know, and I'm going to ask this because we're in radio, Howard Stern.
Oh, yeah, they like each other.
That was going to say, Howard Stern cites Steve Martin as being kind of like his North Star. Like, he wants to know how he would do it, and that's what he does. He talks about that all the time.
Yeah, I think Howard kind of idolizes Steve, but Steve likes Howard.
I would imagine.
Listens to him.
That's funny.
Yeah, I've never met Howard.
Eileen, when one of these people that you mentioned calls, do they call directly or do they have their assistants call you?
Sometimes they call directly, sometimes the assistants call. Most of the time, to be honest with you, we all email. Yeah, so...
Yeah, the phone is becoming passé, right?
Well, they bypass the assistants now by texting.
Right.
Yeah.
So now they're texting each other.
Steve makes a lot of his own calls. Sometimes I make calls for him. It just, it really just depends.
Understood.
Yeah. So, every day is, different. I mean, I don't...
well, tell us, the name of our show is What Do You Know? So tell us something we don't know. Tell us something that would be, surprising or something we haven't asked you.
Putting her on the spot.
I know, it's okay.
You really are.
I know, it's okay.
Arnie.
It's okay.
I think
Arnie's a great. By the way, Arnie, you need to know about your cousin. This is his new career. This is it.
Well, exactly. I think that you should do a show on yourself.
Exactly. Can you interview yourself?
Yes.
You should interview, or just have Scott interview you.
Yeah, have Scott interview me sometime.
Arnie, exactly. I would love to.
When we're snowed in here and we can't get out of the studio.
Right.
And we'll interview each other.
Just constantly.
We're neighbors, by the way. We the Jewish population increased by 5 people when I moved to Missoula.
Oh, are you Jewish too?
Oh yeah.
Well, Scott probably doesn't know that I was born, and I'm Jewish, of course, in Boise, Idaho.
Yeah.
I know that from speaking with your dad.
Of course, yeah.
Well, and Scott used to have a very close working relationship with Lou Reed.
Yes, I did.
Really?
Yes.
What is that about?
I worked with him for about 12 years on a variety of different projects. I was in the music business and the entertainment business. Mm-hmm. And I worked for AOL in Madison Square Garden, and I dealt with him on projects that he and I created together with friends of ours. It was really great. Music, Tai Chi, some film and photographic work. And funnily enough, I dealt with a lot of his personal assistants. And he is so interesting because he had a reputation as being very much, a curmudgeon, really difficult. However, personally, he was incredibly nice, incredibly sweet. And
I met him once backstage at the Leno show. He and Steve were on the same show, I think.
Is that right?
I think so.
But the interesting thing was his assistants were awfully nice, and he was. And it's like you said, they reflect the personality or the people they work with. They're usually.
Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons why I have so much longevity because, every once in a while Steve will, send me a note and say, I can't tell you how many times, people have said how nice you are, how helpful you've been, and. That really makes me feel good because, like I said, I think it's incredibly unnecessary, for people to be jerks. I really do. I find it so unnecessary, and it happens a lot in this business.
Unless that's the name of your first movie and you make billions of dollars.
Yes, exactly.
And made you famous.
They don't like these oil cans.
That's right. It's every time you watch it, it's just still hysterical in the timing, and it was just such a great movie.
Jackie Mason was in the film.
I remember that.
My God!
Is there a time where Steve is? I'm sure he gets asked all the time to do things. Is there ever a time where he says, "I really want to be on the Jimmy Fallon show," or "I really want to do this," and he reaches out, or is it usually more the other way?
No, it's generally the publicist, and it's generally, or the show will always reach out. I mean, everybody always wants him on as a guest.
Right. He's always such a great guest.
But it's generally, he tries to do it judicially, and usually, when there's a project. And, so I think there'll be a lot of, publicity coming up in terms of, in terms of the show coming to Broadway and all of that. And there's been a lot of press and a lot of coverage, and but usually it's either the publicist or the shows will reach out directly to the publicist and say, we'd love to have Steve. So the only time it really was, I think, a collaboration between Steve and somebody like Letterman, who Steve is still very close friends with.
One of our Montana guys.
As
he lives here in Montana. So this just came to mind. When you worked for Carrie, she was married to Paul Simon?
No, they had already split up.
Because Edie is married to Paul Simon,
That is correct.
Yes.
There's a love triangle here.
There's something going on here that we won't be able to talk about, but it just seems kind of. Did you ever? And you obviously have met him and talked with him and.
Oh yeah. You mean Paul?
Yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I had a great thing happen with Paul, actually. Do you have time for another story?
Of course.
I had a great thing happen with him. Like yourself and like my dad, Paul is a lifelong New York Yankee fan.
Right.
And when was it? Not last summer, but the summer before, the Dodgers, and of course I'm a Dodger fan. Not apologizing.
You bleed Dodger blue. I know that.
Yes, I'm not apologizing for this at all. I grew up in Los Angeles, so there's no conflict.
And you let Greinke get away, didn't you?
Yes, that was all my fault. But anyway, the Dodgers came to New York for a 2-game stand with the Yankees at Yankee Stadium, and it was the first time they had played the Yankees in Yankee Stadium since the 1981-82 World Series. I'm not really clear on the date, but anyway, I was at the game, and they always put celebrities up on the Tron, and so I saw that Paul was at the game, and so there were 2 games, and we split it, and I was at the game that the Dodgers won, so of course I left happy. Paul left unhappy. And about 2 nights later, Steve and Edie and the Rangers were playing a show in Stamford, Connecticut, and I went.
Right.
And
Paul performed at that show?
No, he didn't perform, but he was backstage.
Sure.
They live in Connecticut most of the time.
Right.
And so I went up to Paul, whom I've met before, and I said, I saw you on the Tron at the Dodger-Yankee game the other day, and he said, yeah, that was a bad game. And I said, well, actually, no, it wasn't for me. I said, because I'm a Dodger fan. I said, but my dad is a lifelong Yankee fan, and he was in the stadium, as you know, when Garrett gave the speech.
Right.
And I thought Paul was going to cry.
Wow.
I mean, because Paul idolizes Garrick, as do many people who never saw him play. Paul is too young to have ever seen him play.
Right.
But he idolizes him. And I said, so anyway, it was very nice. And anyway, fast forward to the following summer, Steve and Edie came out to play the Hollywood Bowl over the 4th of July for 3 nights. And there were 3 shows, and I was at the first show. And I saw Paul backstage. And I said, do you remember when I told you that my dad was at the Garrick speech? Oh, and it was the 75th anniversary of the Garrick speech.
Right, because it was 76 years ago.
Exactly, in, 4th of July.
Right.
And I said, I'm bringing him in 2 nights. And I said, and if you want to talk to him about it, I'll bring him backstage and you can talk to him about it. And I brought my dad backstage, and Paul was just enraptured talking to my dad. And, of course, he was looking up at him, which he would have to since my dad is 5'11" and Paul is 5'2".
Right.
But, I mean, he was just absolutely enthralled hearing my dad talk about this.
Yeah, well, your dad tells a great story, as our listeners have heard. And
yeah, he absolutely does. But, Paul, I actually met Paul years ago. I think maybe he was already married to Edie, but he and Carrie were still friends, and I think they probably still are.
Okay.
I like the fact that we're calling them Steve and Edie.
Yes.
I know, isn't that like the best thing ever? My mother just loved the other Steve and Edie.
Yes.
Can you let us know again, the play opens on Broadway in March.
March 24th.
What's the name and what theater?
It's called Bright Star, and boy, I'd love to be able to tell you the name of the theater, and I don't remember off the top of my head.
Does it go into previews, Eileen?
It goes into previews prior to the 4th. Not really sure on the days.
Arnie, we're going to have to do a road trip.
Yep, we're going to have to go on a road trip.
Road trip.
Yep.
And, of course, if you're looking for, a connection to get good seats.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
Not to all of your listening audience, but to you guys, the Jews from Montana, I think I can help you out.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
I'm always willing to help a brother out, you know what I mean? Or a lawnsman. Which I'm sure most of your audience in Montana has no idea what that is.
They don't.
We're going to educate them.
You know what happened when I first met Arnie 2.5 years ago?
I have no idea.
He brought me 2 Hebrew National salamis. I know.
As a housewarming?
Not even as a housewarming gift. I was at the office here, and we had met, and he ran out. 20 minutes later, he came back with 2... what do they call them? You gave me those
chubs.
Yeah,
Hebrew
National.
Hebrew National.
A couple of chubs.
The bullets. The bullets.
The bullets. By the way,
speaking of the difference between Jews and Gentiles, here's a good one.
Yes.
I love when people ask me if Steve is Jewish. Because they always think because somebody is a comedian, they're probably Jewish.
Right.
This man was born in Waco, Texas. He grew up in Orange County, California. He's Scottish, English, and Irish. He's about as far from Jewish as you can get.
Yes.
And I remember a friend of mine, a wonderful woman who was one of the producers of Picasso at the La Panagile, who unfortunately passed away a few years ago. She told me the story about being at dinner with Steve and Mel Brooks and a couple of other people. And you guys know that Jews like to eat off of each other's plates.
Yeah, of course.
And so Mel took something off of Joan's plate, and Joan said, I looked over, and Steve looked absolutely horrified.
Well, you don't want to be shortchanged with your serving portion. So
no, absolutely. I mean, the fork just comes over and nobody ever asks.
By the way, just for the audience's purposes, Bright Star is going to be at the Court Theater in New York City, and performances begin on February 25th.
I love you more than anything, Arnie.
And opening
Thank you for doing my research.
And opening night scheduled for March 24th.
That is correct. That much I knew.
Right. So it's the Court Theater in New York City for those of you who want to get tickets now so they can see this fabulous performance.
Steve Martin. Well, we're going to send this to
now,
our...
you know Steve is not in the show.
Right.
He just wrote it with Edie.
Right.
Yes. But there are fabulous people in the show. The lead is a woman named Carmen Cusack, who has one of the most beautiful voices and is an absolutely enchanting girl.
Well, that's going to be great. We can't wait.
Well, you have to come.
Well, look,
we will.
This has been a wonderful hour. We appreciate your time, Eileen. This is, I feel like our audience learned a lot.
I learned a lot.
I was concerned because, following the former governor of Montana, I was a little, concerned.
Yeah, but he doesn't know who you know, so that's he's not as connected as you are, Eileen.
But he knows you, Arnie.
That's one step removed. It's just one step removed. Eileen, it's been a pleasure as always, and
thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
God, I sure hope so. Come visit, and you come too, Scott.
Thank you, Eileen. It was
we
nice
love California. You come down and visit us, okay? All right.
Take care, Eileen. We love you.
Thanks so much. Love you too.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All right, that was Eileen Waterstone on What Do You Know? Great guest.
It's a fascinating life to live that kind of life and to mingle with who she mingles with, particularly in our society that's so starstruck.
Right.
People who, wait hours and hours for the opening of a show or, line up outside a theater just to get a glimpse of a celebrity. They would think that this is the dream, job and the dream life. To be able to, just casually roll off your tongue, Martin Short or Carrie Fisher or, Howard Stern or Steve Martin or, can be on the Tonight Show anytime he wants or, be with Jimmy Fallon.
Right. And what do they say? They put their pants legs on one leg at a time.
Right.
And that they're just like you and me, except they happen to have...
Well, what's so interesting, why I thought it would be good to have Eileen on the show and talk to us, is that Steve Martin really is a Renaissance man. I mean, he's... as you know, he's a musician. He's an actor. He's a writer. He's written serious, literature. He's an art collector.
Right.
He has. If there really is a person who is eclectic in their, across the arts and letters, even. Steve Martin.
He's it.
Yeah.
He's a creator. There's very few like him, if any. He is in a class by himself.
And he's 70 years old now. I mean, you don't realize that he doesn't look it, and he doesn't act it. In the movies, you don't see him playing, the grandfather figure, at this point. But he's had a long career. He's been in the limelight, in the spotlight, on people's radar screen for close to 45 years.
But I think, what we did? We did a good job in this interview because we really talked about Eileen as much as we talked about Steve. Because
I thought it's important to hear what a job like that is all about and how she handles all of that.
Yeah, and we got really did, and we got a glimpse into what her life is like and how she keeps everything into perspective, which I think is why she's been so successful.
Well, you usually don't keep a job that long. Those jobs are pretty, they go through, as she mentioned about Lauren Michaels has had a whole slew of personal assistants. She's been there for 27 years and she'll probably stay until she decides to retire.
Lou Reed had 5 assistants when I worked with him in those 12 years. And the first one I met was his best one. And she left him because she went on to pursue her passion in fashion, believe it or not.
Well, and one of the points she mentioned I thought was really, I think, interesting is that in the 21st century here, the technology has changed not only her job, but the way people interact with each other. Like you would think, in my mind, I'm thinking the phone's ringing all day, and this agent wants to talk to him, and this person is trying to get through to him, and one of his buddy wants to have lunch, and, all these phone calls going on, and really it's not that at all.
Right.
It's text and email and, and Twitter and all of that. It's the social media way of them relating to each other. And
why would it be any different? You're right.
Right, it's not any different. And
we don't talk on the phone that much.
Well, the funny one was at the very beginning when he had the Commodore computer. They were in the same house. They're sending email messages to each other.
Yeah, right.
So it really has changed.
Let me ask you a question.
Sure.
Shifting gears for a second.
Shifting a gear.
What is, we talked about this. It's 2016. What's on your list, on your bucket list of what, media, TV show, film, music that you want to see?
Well, I have some guilty pleasures like everyone else. I mean, I like watching Blacklist. on TV. I think James Spader plays a character, Red, that's very dynamic. Raymond Reddington, and so I'm have an addiction to watch that show and keep up with it. There's some great movies coming out. Hail Caesar, which is a Coen Brothers film that'll be coming out, in the I guess early part of this year, with a great cast, including James Brolin and a number of other. I'm trying to remember who's in the film, but it has a really good cast. And typical Coen Brothers kind
we
of
just
movie.
saw Burn After Reading again on HBO. Is it Burn After Reading with George Clooney?
Yeah, well, Clooney's going to be in Hail Caesar also. He plays the main character in it, and Scarlett Johansson is also in it.
Perfect.
The Batman, Superman movies coming out, with Ben Affleck playing Batman.
Yep.
And,
is it coming out in 2016?
Yeah, I've already saw a clip from that.
The one show I want to see that I can't wait is called Vinyl on HBO about the music industry from the 70s.
With the lead guy is...
it's a Mick Jagger and Martin Scorsese produced.
Right, and who's the main star in that? Do you remember?
I thought it was Mick Jagger's son.
No.
He's a support actor?
Yeah, I think he's a support actor in it. There's a good cast. I saw a clip of that. I mean, there's a lot of movies. I'm a film guy. My dad worked for Universal Pictures as a kid growing up. My great uncle George directed over 70 feature films.
Is that right?
So
I do have to interview you.
So I've always been more focused on film than any other media, and so I kind of keep an eye on what's going to be coming down the pike. And I have actors that I particularly like to watch, and there are movies that when they're on, when you're going through the channels and you see a clip of something that you hadn't seen in a long time, you want to stop and watch the great ones, when they're available to be seen.
Let me ask you a question. 3 films are in your backpack. You're on a long plane trip. What are they? 3 films.
Well, it depends on your mood, but I think you have to. I would have to have Godfather 1 and 2. We'll call those one.
That's one.
Yeah, Godfather 1 and 2 would be one of them. In terms of a comedy, would probably if I was going to put one comedy in there, it would have to be I think something like the classic, like Some Like It Hot, with Jack Lemmon and Tony Curtis and Marilyn Monroe. To cover the that period, and then I would say that we would add to that something more dramatic and more moving, something with a great actor, something like like a Marlon Brando, like Apocalypse Now.
Okay.
It's hard to pick 3. There's you see the list, they're always the top 50.
But you had
100.
a comedy, a drama,
right? But there's others that I would wouldn't
historical?
leave. Blade Runner.
Blade Runner.
It's a great movie with
it is. Rutger Hauer.
Rutger Hauer is in the minor part, and our Han Solo,
Harrison Ford,
in the main part. I just watched American Graffiti the other day.
Great
it was
film. Richard
great
Dreyfuss
movie with Richard Dreyfuss's first film. Outlaw Josie Wales always has a soft spot for Outlaw Josie Wales. There's a lot of Saving Private Ryan. The first 30 minutes of that. Schindler's List.
A lighthearted film.
Well, the great ones. I appreciate good acting, good cinematography.
Yep.
Woody Allen. Some of the Woody Allen movies, Manhattan.
With Annie Hall.
With Gordon Parks doing the photography and that. It's hard to really pick the 3. It's like picking 3 books. What 3 books would you have?
I haven't read 3 books. Well, look, this was we had a great conversation with Eileen. I want to thank you for setting that up.
Not a problem. I was
going to say, we'll be back next week with What Do You Know here on KGVO. And don't forget to tune in 8 a.m. Sunday mornings. We'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to What Do You Know?
I can't wait for the next show, Scott.
I'm excited too, Arnie. If you'd like to suggest a guest, send me an email at scottrichmond@townsquaremedia.com. We'll see you next week. And thanks for listening to Newstalk KGVO, AM 1290, 101.5 FM, and newstalkkgvo.com.